Well, let's cross live now to Professor Lyal Sunga from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law to get some more insight on this. Thanks for joining us. The US officials have anonymously admitted that American forces are interrogating prisoners, but they deny any knowledge of torture, of human rights abuses at these locations. Now, how can we actually trust them, considering how previous denials have resulted in, for example, a famous quote by Obama when he said, you know, we did torture some folks after Abu Ghraib, after Guantanamo. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's very important to have independent, impartial, objective fact-finding in such situations. It's not enough to rely on standard denials that we hear from either the Yemeni forces or UAE or United States or any country's government for that matter. If we're seeing credible reports, and you know, I think as the Associated Press is a very credible organization that knows how to conduct good investigative journalism, and if the sources that it has for the information are not only alleged former prisoners, but also Yemeni security officers, etc., you start to think that, you know, we're triangulating the facts very well. And if the facts are alleged are so explosive as this, it really is very important for the United States, for UAE, and for the Yemeni forces, and anybody else who may be involved, implicitly or by complicity or in any way, to open this up to independent fact-finding. Where does this independent fact-finding come from? Well, it could come from the International Committee of the Red Cross, could come from the United Nations Human Rights Council's Special Rapporteur against torture. Not only that, but the government of Yemen and UAE, and for that matter the United States and others, they have become state parties to the United Nations Convention Against Torture, which also encourages the inspections and fact-finding through the UN Committee Against Torture. So there are a lot of ways to open this thing up and let's see the facts. And because there's no doubt that torture is absolutely prohibited in international law. And you'd think that after, you know, Abu Ghraib and other terrible instances which have been very well documented and finally admitted, that all parties would stay away from, uncivilized behavior if
I'd just like to ask you,
going on.
Professor, sorry to interrupt, I just want to get as many questions as I can in. What if the US, though it wasn't complicit in the torture, it wasn't actually violating any international laws, but it was perhaps using intelligence that was gathered by its allies through the use of torture? I mean, could that, for example, if that was the case, could that result to any sort of legal violation?
Well, you know, everybody has an interest, all civilized countries have an interest in fighting Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in general. So intelligence sharing, which is done through the United States Joint Special Operations Command with the government of Yemen, is to be expected, and it's a good thing. So is training. Interrogation, there one has to be very, very careful. I don't think it's enough to say, well, you know, we didn't torture, and the person that's brought before us, well, they seem to have been softened up, how cooperative they are. You know, we're not personally, directly hands-on involved. Under the rules and the Convention Against Torture, if you cooperate, or if you are part of a process in the interrogation, even if you don't do it yourself, if you're complicit in some way, that could import legal responsibility under international law. So it's a very serious issue, and it's something that commanders and people at all levels, at all ranks, have to be very careful about, because the rules are quite clear. Okay. And I've understood that the United States base is not very far away from apparently where these interrogations are alleged to have taken place, and torture or cruel and inhuman or degrading treatment. So, you start to wonder, well, is it just a wink and a nod and say, well, we're not involved directly, so we're not responsible. You have an obligation to inquire properly and to find out and not to cooperate with processes that amount to torture.
Okay, Professor Lyal Sunga, that's all we have time for today, but thanks so much for your insight. Professor Lyal Sunga from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.